It's 1923. Deep in the dense humid jungles of Brazil, a small settlement called Verde sits stuck between low emerald hills. It's not much more than a cluster of clay brick homes, a schoolhouse, and a dirt road that fades into forest. But around 600 people call it home. They're farmers, laborers, really just families who live simple lives cut out from the world. But soon, Verde will be anything but simple. Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. I'm Drew, and today we're taking a look at one of the strangest cases of disappearance in modern history. But before we get into that, just know that while our stories are based on true events, sometimes details get lost in time and accounts may conflict. Also, may very likely butcher some pronunciations, so just take it as entertainment. One morning, a small Brazilian army patrol charting borderlands near Acre cut through the jungle that morning. Just another routine assignment in a region few dared to enter. But as they approached Verde, something seemed off. From a distance, they see smoke rising from chimneys, and as they got closer, the smell of wood fire was still in the air, but there was no sound coming from the villagers. Normally, they would hear children running around, dogs barking, or workers out in their fields, but now it's just silence. They just kind of dismiss it and keep going. And they walk into the village expecting to see everyone there, but instead they find the whole town is just empty. Not just the streets, but every building too. And this is pretty weird, so they decide to investigate, and what they find is half-eaten breakfasts, pots still warm from cooking, tools lying on the ground, and tables as if someone just dropped them mid-job. And when the soldiers reach the schoolhouse, they find the desks neatly arranged, but no children, and the chalkboard was covered in yesterday's lesson. And scrawled across the top, in hurried, uneven handwriting, are 4 words. Não há salvação. There is no salvation. And they're really not sure if that's related to everyone missing, so it is eerie, but they keep on going. And not only do they not find a single person in the whole village, they also don't find any signs of a struggle. There's no blood or footprints leading the way. And what's stranger still is that even the animals, the dogs, the chickens, the goats, they're all gone too. It's like the entire population of living creatures just evaporated. And there was really nothing for the soldiers to do. They weren't police, and their mission wasn't to find anybody, so eventually they did have to leave and continue with their patrol. But they couldn't help but be curious. They asked around and told other people about how the whole village just vanished. Half just share this wild story, and half were hoping to find an explanation, but there really was none. But when word reached nearby towns, the rumors exploded. They go from bandits to disease to a mass exodus or something stranger. But the more professional and amateur investigators look, the more the facts twist and blur. Because soon the people who claimed to have found the village can't agree on what they saw. Some insist that there were signs of violence. Others say the homes were perfectly tidy, and official records are barely there at all. Just a few mentions in scattered archives, half-legible clippings, stories retold by locals who heard it from their grandparents. It's a ghost town that might have never existed, or one that was erased on purpose. The Brazilian patrol that first reported the empty village made their statement to local authorities in Acre. It's near the Peruvian border, and they said that Verde looked like it had been abandoned hours before their arrival. Food on tables still warm, laundry still hanging from lines, even a radio humming faintly in one home. And some reports claimed that that radio was tuned to military frequencies, suggesting that someone had been listening for news. Other reports also say that there was a child's doll laying in the streets with its head missing, like it was dropped by someone trying to leave in a hurry. Investigators combed the site, but just like the soldiers reported, there were no bodies, tracks, or signs of a mass flight. But what really confused investigators was the fact that if hundreds of people had vanished into the jungle, they would have almost certainly left signs. broken foliage, discarded items, footprints, especially if they had taken all of their livestock. But there were none. There was not a single sign. The patrol's commanding officer, a man named Colonel Fawcett, the same Perry Fawcett who would later vanish in the Amazon himself, was reportedly informed about the case. Whether he ever went himself is unknown, but the timing of his disappearance fits. If true, this means that the disappearance of Verde predates Fawcett's own legendary vanishing by only a few years. So what could erase an entire village overnight? 3 theories survive, each more disturbing than the last. The first theory is that in the early 1920s, Brazil was in political chaos. The Tenente revolts were spreading, groups of young military officers rebelling against the government. Some historians suggest that Verde was caught in the crossfire. Perhaps the villagers were rebels or was thought to harbor them, and it was wiped out by loyalist forces. If that's true, the phrase, "there is no salvation," might be sort of a warning, a final message written by someone who knew what was coming. But no records of any such operation exists, and it seems far too clean to be such a violent operation. The second theory paints a simpler picture, just fear. Some say that rumors of approaching soldiers or disease caused the villagers to flee overnight, but even that doesn't really add up. With no bodies, no encampments, or neighboring towns that reported 600 refugees all at once, they simply disappeared. And then there's the strangest and perhaps most unnerving theory. Brazil's interior is steeped in folklore. Stories of encantados, shape-shifting beings that lure humans into the jungle. Stories of ancient Ananga spirits said to protect the forest by removing those who defy it. Some locals believe that Verde offended something, that they disturbed the wrong part of the jungle or unearthed something sacred, and as a result, the entire village was taken by whatever these things were. And that phrase on the blackboard, "there is no salvation," was because once they came, there never was any hope. Today, no trace of Verde exists. Maps from the time list it faintly, but modern satellite imagery shows nothing but an endless, churning green jungle. Even its location is debated. Some say it was near the borders of Acre and Amazonas. Others insist it was further south, closer to Rondônia. What's left are fragments, a handful of reports, a single phrase, and creeping thought that maybe it's not that we lost Verde, it's that we were never supposed to find it again. Either way, for decades after the alleged disappearance, Verde became one of those names whispered among soldiers, missionaries, and explorers traveling deep in Brazil's interior. It was sort of a ghost story told beside campfires, a warning to not stray off the trail or trade roads. But every legend has its echoes, and Verde's didn't fade quietly. In the 1940s, long after the first reports had died down, a group of rubber tappers claimed that they found the lost village. They said that the ground where Verde once stood was covered with fine white ash, not from fire, but like something had drained the life from the soil itself. They said that no trees grew there and it was eerily quiet. No birds sang and animals seemed to keep their distance. 2 of the men reportedly never made it back, and the survivors said that the forest closed in behind them, that the vines seemed to thicken around, and the sound of insects faded away and the air became heavy and electric, like breathing took a lot of effort. And they said that there were hundreds of faint voices whispering in a language that none of them recognized. The local tribes told them that they had entered a forbidden zone. They said that it was a place the forest itself had reclaimed. Then, in the 1960s, a journalist named Carlos de Matos tried to track the story. He was only able to find scraps, military footnotes referencing Operation Verde, dated 1923, but blacked out in every archive. When De Matos pressed further, his editor pulled him aside and told him to stop. Then, 2 days later, Carlos' notes from all of his months of research were stolen from his car. His article never ran, and when asked about it later, he told colleagues some stories don't want to be found. And then there's Percy Fawcett, the same explorer who vanished in 1925 searching for the lost city of Z. Some historians think that Fawcett's obsession started with the Verde reports, with the idea that an entire community could disappear without a trace. Fawcett wrote cryptic letters before he vanished, mentioning a place erased from maps and a power in the jungle older than civilization. If that's true, then Verde was a mystery that sent one of history's most famous explorers chasing ghosts into the Amazon, never to return. Even today, the strangeness continues. Satellite scans sometimes show unexplained geometric clearings in the same region, too symmetrical to be natural and too deep to be easily reached. Missionaries in the early 2000s reported strange lights seen hovering above the canopy near the supposed coordinates, vanishing moments before anyone approached. One local hunter told a researcher in 2011 that, while tracking game, he stumbled upon the remains of old clay bricks and rusted cookware deep in the trees. And when he did, he heard faint, childlike laughter just beyond the brush, which, of course, he found immensely creepy, so he turned and ran. But when he looked back, the trail behind him was totally gone. The story of Verde has never been proven. No definitive records or coordinates or survivors. And some say it's a legend that grew from a rumor and war, but others believe it's evidence that an entire place can be swallowed by secrecy, by the jungle, or something stranger. What's left behind is that message, still echoing through time like a warning written on a blackboard a century ago. There is no salvation. A century has passed since Verde was said to vanish, and today historians, researchers, and skeptics still can't agree on one thing. Did this village ever exist at all? Modern investigators who've dug into the archives of Acre and Amazonas say the first verifiable mention of Verde doesn't appear until the 1980s in a book called The Vanished Cities of Brazil by author O.D.C. Santos. Before that, there's nothing. No census, trade records, or missionary journals. It's as if the story itself materialized from thin air. And some point out that phrase, there is no salvation, that it appears in older folklore tales from southern Brazil, often written on blackboards or doorframes as a symbol of doom or divine punishment. And maybe someone took that symbol, mixed it with a unrecorded ghost town, and the myth grew legs of its own. Others argue that the entire thing was made up to be an early 20th century morality tale that got retold until people mistook it for history. And yet, even if Verde was born from rumor, too many stories persist to ignore. Old telegraphs referencing a missing village archived in Rio de Janeiro's military museum. Logbooks listing a supply route that suddenly ends, with HV written as its destination. An oral tradition in nearby indigenous communities that describe a village that called the forest's wrath. If those accounts are genuine, then maybe the event happened under another name, a real disappearance, rewritten over time as Verde. Maybe that's what draws people to stories like this, because the idea of an entire community vanishing with no bodies or answers taps into something ancient in us. That fear of being erased, that suspicion that the world we see isn't complete, that there are corners of it still ruled by something beyond human understanding. And in a time when everything is documented, tracked, and explained, we crave the mysteries that refuse to be solved. They remind us of how fragile we are, how the jungle can still keep its secrets. Whether Verde was real or not, the story endures. A whisper carried through the canopy, warning anyone who listens too closely that some places don't disappear because of war or famine or disease. They disappear because something wanted them gone. And if the legend is true, then something deep in the endless green, beneath vines and roots that have swallowed time itself, The schoolhouse still stands, and across its crumbling blackboard, written in black chalk turned to dust, the same message waits. There is no salvation. Maybe Oro Verde was never meant to be found, and maybe it never existed at all. But the human mind has a way of keeping its own ghosts alive, repeating the same stories until they feel like memories. So whether it was a forgotten settlement lost to time or something far stranger that stepped beyond it, it leaves us with a question that no one can answer. If an entire village can vanish without a trace, what else might be able to? Until next time, stay safe and keep watch, because legends may live.